Hi, welcome back to Visa Yoga. My name is Hannah. We're going to continue to look into sun salutations, and this time including some variations in the different positions that combine into a sun salute using blogs. And using blogs is not only a great way for beginners to make certain positions and movements more accessible, or just beginners or just different body types really, but it's also a great way for us in general to include some variability in our practice. So create different loading scenarios, bring some more awareness into different parts of our body, in a sense of, for instance, if we think of the spine and spine mobility, are there maybe some sleepy parts that we're kind of not really getting into when we're looking into extension of the spine? So these are some aspects that we will touch on in this video. So grab your yoga blocks and let's go. We're starting in standing. So just as a regular sun salute, we would start in a standing position, finding your mountain pose, and simply bringing the block between your palms. And then circling your shoulders toward your ears and down your spine. And we're trying, as we go through this movement, to keep our lower ribs in and down. So pulling them a little bit down. As we start lifting our arms, what we kind of want to avoid is finding kind of this extension through our lower back and thrusting our ribs out. So finding a stable position, a neutral position in your pelvis, and pulling your lower ribs slightly in and down. Circling the shoulders back, reaching the arms forward. We're creating a bit of resistance as we kind of press into the block, and then starting to lift the arms up, keeping that resistance in the palms, and lower back down. Let's just do 3 to 5 rounds. And after a couple of repetitions, we're coming back down and bringing the block into different positions. So between our forearms. It's a bit tricky sometimes to position the block. And then from here, we're rolling our wrists out toward the ceiling. And what that does, we're already bringing a bit of an external rotation into our shoulder. And it's this kind of awareness of the external rotation that we will also need in a downward facing dog. So again, circling your shoulders down and back, stretching your arms forward, checking in with the position of your pelvis, so not kind of overextending into this anterior tilt. Neutral position, lower ribs in and down, stretching the arms forward, and then again, we're lifting up. Creating a little bit of resistance, finding that feeling of external rotation in your shoulder. Just one more round. And releasing the block down. Positioning one block or 2 blocks or even more height in front of you. So coming from a mountain pose into a forward fold. Reaching up, hands over your head, we would kind of fall down either with the hands through the midline or outside the body, hinging from your hips, and then lowering the upper body down, finding that flexion in your spine. And sometimes the difficulty here is to kind of bring the hands onto the ground. So what happens then is kind of rounding completely also in our lower back, or we bend the knees more. So sometimes what makes it easier to kind of relax into that position is to find your ground. And while you can also do that with finding the ground on your legs, using the blogs to bring the ground closer to you is a nice way. to arrive a little bit with more ease into that forward fold. Coming up into a halfway lift and folding back down. In terms of the position, you could also obviously place the blocks one side each. So here really you can just find the height and variation that works best for you. From here, as we are going to step back into downward facing dog, placing the blocks down, and we're placing our palms onto the blocks, bending the knees as much as needed, stepping back, left foot, right foot, downward facing dog. So coming into a downward facing dog with your palms on the blocks, what happens here? First of all, we're shifting our weight, our hips, a little bit back. So we're taking off some weight of the wrists. So in a normal downward facing dog, this would be the position. Finding that external rotation again in your shoulders, pulling the lower ribs in and up, pressing through the ground. And this is a challenging position in different ways, not only kind of to find that openness in your chest and shoulders, finding the length through your spine, but also the stretch, the flexibility that we need kind of in the posterior chain of our legs. So by using the blocks in the beginning, we're elevating, again, we're bringing the ground closer. We're elevating the wrists, and we're shifting the center of gravity further back. So by that, in the sense of the heavy point of our hips and the buttocks, they shifted further back. So it's a little bit less weight pushing forward and allowing us, giving us a bit more space in the back chain of our legs. In any case, if your heels don't come down, don't worry about that, just bend your knees. So this is one variation that we can introduce blocks into downward facing dog. We could also position blocks at the back. So if it's more about that stretch in your calves and the difficulties with maintaining that position, we could also stay on our toes and simply support our heels in this downward facing dog. Making the flexion a little bit easier in our ankles. And coming back down into your tabletop position. From here we would, in a sun salute 1, move through spinal extension and flexion. And a nice way to kind of maybe slow down the pace a little bit and also find those movements in different parts of our spine is by using blocks. So one exercise that I did first with in a workshop with Move with Ease is stacking the blocks on top of each other and kind of setting yourself up so that they are supported on your lower ribs and finding your tabletop position here. So the idea here is to give you a little bit of feedback as to where in your spine you're moving. So finding stability here, and the idea now is to first find flexion and extension in your lower back and pelvis. So trying to keep the thoracic spine the mid-spine, upper spine, as well as your cervical spine, still for a moment. So inhaling, extension. Exhaling, finding flexion. And this might slow down the movement, obviously. As we're trying to kind of segment or really kind of locate this movement in the different parts of our spine. So as to notice where are we actually moving from. And releasing. In order to move toward the thoracic spine, the upper spine, this is probably the more challenging part for a lot of us, in the sense of finding the extension in our thoracic spine without using a lot of lower back and pelvis movement. So what we can do here is placing, for instance, a block onto that area. So you're finding your position as into trying to not move that area. So giving some feedback here in a way that we want to not move the block. And finding extension through your thoracic spine. This might be very small movement. It's kind of the sternum moving down and a bit forward. And flexion in your thoracic spine. Again, this might be a small movement, so really kind of tuning into how and where do you kind of activate this movement. And release the block to the side. For this last part, you can do just the cervical spine, which is, the most accessible probably for most of us. If you still would like to get some feedback in a sense of where not to use the movement or not to locate the movement right now, again, putting blocks on your back. And then simply finding flexion and extension in your cervical spine. Without crunching your neck, so keeping length. And then after a couple of rounds, let's combine all the movements. So coming back to your regular cat-cow, finding the extension from your pelvis, lower back into your mid-back, thoracic spine, cervical spine, and then flexion starting maybe in your pelvis, lower back, mid-back, and cervical spine, chin towards chest. Continue one more round, starting in your pelvis, lower back, unfolding through your thoracic spine, lifting up the chin, cow. Exhale, unfolding or rolling in, rather just say, back into the cat. Tugging your toes, choosing your variation, maybe blocks under your hands or under your heels. Push yourself back up. Downward facing dog. Pushing the ground away, opening your shoulders. Bend your knees as much as needed. Taking a couple of breaths in your downward facing dog. And start walking your feet forward. Finding your forward fold. Inhaling into a straight back. Exhale down. Pressing the feet into the ground, lifting all the way up. Hands over your head. And back down into